On June 14, 1777, the Continental Congress decided the Stars and Stripes design would be the new American flag design. The flag clearly marked U.S. property and protected our Navy.
Some of the history about flag desecration is very, very interesting. In 1968, it began with the Congress enacting the first Federal Flag Protection Act. And it was because of the Vietnam conflict. There was lots and lots of problems, protesters. I believe there was even flag burning in protest of the war. They didn't believe that there should be a war. The act did not occur for all states, and it was not because of the Constitution technically. These were the first certain times when they really started applying the First Amendment to the flag desecration, to the First Amendment, I guess you could say.
In the case Street versus New York, Sidney Street burned a flag which he owned at a street corner because of a shooting of James Meredith, a civil rights leader, and he said that if the U.S. can let that happen to Meredith, that we don't need no flag. He argued that New York state law contradicted federal law, so federal law won. New York law is that it is illegal to cast contempt or publicly defy any American flag. Street argued that federal law permitted for the burning of flags. This statement is true, that federal law does permit for the burning of flags, but only if they are too worn to fly. New York law did not contradict federal law because this flag was not burned because it was too worn to fly, but it was because Street was angry, which is not allowed.
After publicly burning an American flag as a means of political protest, Johnson was convicted of desecrating the flag in violation of Texas law. This presented the question of whether his conviction was consistent with the First Amendment. Johnson appealed to the Supreme Court, where Texas argued that it had a right to protect the American flag. Johnson argued that his freedom to express himself through the First Amendment protected his actions. In a 5-4 vote, the Supreme Court ruled for Johnson. They rejected the claim that the ban was necessary to protect breaches of the peace due to the offense that a burning of flag would cause.
A few of the cases, such as United States and Eichmann, the court used a different act, the Flag Protection Act of 1989, for this Supreme Court case. They decided not to review the case of Johnson once more, which they had been asked to do. Instead, the court decided that the interest protected by the act was the same interest which had been put forth to support the Texas statute and rejected in Johnson. Therefore, although this act was somewhat broader than the Texas statute, it still suffered from the same fundamental flaw, namely, it suppressed expression out of concern for its likely commutative impact. This being the case, the majority found O'Brien test was inapplicable, and the act must be subject to the most exacting scrutiny. As in Johnson, the statute in question could not withstand the level of scrutiny.
There are many current issues on flag burning today. I will be addressing 2 of them. The first took place in South Dakota in 2005. Senator John Thune said he would sponsor an amendment to give Congress the power to protect the flag through legislation. Thune said it doesn't necessarily in the Constitution ban it, but it allows Congress to have the power that then could be, if it were ever challenged in court, if Congress enacts legislation that would protect the flag, it would make that legislation constitutional. 2 flag amendments were introduced in the U.S. House in January. Supporters point out that the House has passed a flag amendment 5 times with well over the required 2/3 majority, but the Senate has not gotten the 2/3 vote necessary to send it to the states for ratification. A more recent issue occurred at LSU on May 10, 2011. A student planned to burn an American flag on the LSU campus, but cut short Wednesday when thousands of combative counter-demonstrators arrived on scene, prompting police to escort the student to safety. Crowds wearing red, white, and blue and chanting USA threw water balloons and ice at Benjamin Haas, a communications studies graduate student, while he tried to read a prepared statement in front of an estimated crowd of 1,500 to 2,500 students and community members. Haas' protest was followed by a separate peaceful assembly led by LSU Student Government President Cody Wells in front of a crowd gathered around the campus flagpole. Wells read the history behind the American flag and led the audience in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and singing the national anthem.
Now, more interestingly, a lot of the history behind it has been more recent in the past, say, 50, 60, 70 years, 1968 through present day. Even so that in the early 18th century, 17th century, flag burning for the United States and through European countries had been practiced, but I don't believe it was as broad of an issue as it is with commercialism and symbols and really desecration that can occur today. From my readings, I've learned that, in the early 1900s, they set some rules, some Flag Protection Act type things, but it was adopted by all the states, but it was never applied to the Constitution. Does that mean that this video does not apply to what the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the First Amendment says? No way, by all means. The First Amendment definitely has a lot to do with flag desecration and all the issues today. It is brought up in the court cases, it's seen in the Supreme Court cases. It's definitely applicable in this situation. But the history of it is very limited and very different than what you would say the history of freedom of religion is, or other parts of freedom of speech. Whereas freedom of religion, you can see the individual court cases. This church had wanted to do this, or this state didn't like what this church part was doing, whatever the case may be. But with freedom of speech, maybe the press was doing something wrong, and we didn't know if it was constitutionally sound or not. But this is very just one specific thing, because there's only a certain amount of numbers of flags, of United States flags. There's only one 50-star design. There were other multiple stars and stripes designs, but today there's one flag design we go by, and when that is desecrated, it's either constitutionally sound or it's not constitutionally sound. It means the world to the soldiers to see their flag flying high in the sky, and soldiers overseas, they're so excited to come home, and when their parents are standing there with flags, or their sons and daughters standing holding flags. I know I'm going to be at the Memorial Day parade. There's flags all around, but it's just the joy on their faces, and the veterans that are served and honored by us kids, and my grandfather and stuff is a veteran, so he sees pride in our American flag. So personal opinion is that I don't believe that you should burn the flag in protest. There are better things to do than protest by burning a symbol of our pride, America's, our history, our nation, anything like that. I think there are better ways to say, I don't want this war happening, I don't like what this person did, whatever. I think, yes, it is constitutionally sound because obviously it's your voice, you can say what you want, you can do that, but there are better ways to do it. And I believe that's what Scripture would tell us in the Bible. It would be that we have the freedom to express this, but God asks us not to be violent and upset others for the bettering of His kingdom. Sometimes it's good to be silent, and sometimes your voice doesn't need to be heard all the time.
We were aligned.
You can say whatever you want and not get in trouble.
With the law.
Well, freedom of speech is like having freedom of expression.
Nobody can control like what you want to say.
It's something in the Constitution.
Yeah, it's like
It's like the First Amendment.
After a flag is ripped or something, then it's honoring it. But if it's just like burning it for the sake of burning it, then it's not constitutional.
It's your choice. Like if you go buy a flag at like Walmart and then burn it, it's your choice. But if you're taking like another country's flag and burning it, that's disrespectful.
It depends on the flag.
Do you think it should be allowed?
No.
Unless it's like a
Not unless
flag or the flag touches the ground or something.
I think I would kill whoever burns them.